What does it take to be an entrepreneur? Dr. Andrew Roberts has some words of advice on the Midwest Flourish. Greetings, I'm Rick Farrant, and I'm your host for the Midwest Flourish. And today our guest is Dr. Andrew Roberts, who is chair of the leadership team of SCORE in Northeast Indiana. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Tell us what SCORE is, in caps, SCORE, and what it does.
Yeah, so SCORE is a great organization. We are a national nonprofit partner of the SBA that provides free one-on-one business mentoring as well as online educational content like workshops and webinars.
And so all of it is free?
Yes and no. Historically, everything we've done has been free, including the workshops and webinars. We'll probably get into it a little bit later, but SCORE as an organization is changing their business model where they will start charging for some of their services, but our core will remain the same, which is the mentoring.
You've had a pretty interesting professional journey and still are having that journey, right? Because you are a practicing physician, is that correct?
Correct.
You're also an entrepreneur, correct?
Correct.
So tell us about what you've done and what you're doing now and what you may do in the future, if you've even given that any thought.
Yeah. So like you mentioned, I am a physician by training. So I've been in school probably more than half my life. I did the straight on through, college or high school, college, and medical school. So that part isn't too untraditional. I worked for several different hospitals in the state, IU Health and Community Network and whatnot. But you are right. I caught the entrepreneurial itch kind of later in my career, and I ended up starting a business, which was a chain of outpatient addiction clinics, which unfortunately, there, obviously being a big need for them, it kind of did better than I expected. So I ended up exiting that company a couple years ago, which allowed me to pursue other interests, but such as volunteering with SCORE. But you are correct. I still am technically practicing. I practice at Matthew 25 here in town, which is a clinic for uninsured people, but I don't technically work anywhere for money, but I still do practice.
So in other words, you don't need money.
Correct. Yes. I was fortunate enough to, when I did sell the business, that I no longer needed to work. And currently at the moment, I'm choosing not to work for money, but that may change in the future. And I have occasionally gone back and taken a normal W-2 job just out of boredom.
Well, the interesting thing about this is at least for a physician that is doing it for the right reasons, this is a calling. And it sounds to me like, if you're doing work, probably part-time work for Matthew 25, that is a calling. If you were developing a business for addiction recovery, that would be a calling, right? The things that these have in common basically is uplifting people, right?
For sure.
Is that near and dear to you, and why is that? Not that it's a bad thing. That's kind of a crazy question.
No, I totally get it. I mean, it's definitely, not for everybody. Everybody is so busy with their lives and taking care of bills and kids and whatnot. It's hard to kind of really find the time or energy to volunteer or give back, even though many people probably would if they could.
Right, because you mentioned at some point, I think it was in one of the news releases or something, that you believed that it was really important for people to give back to the community.
Oh, for sure.
Where did that come from in you?
So I grew up here, or I grew up in Garrett, which, small town north of Fort Wayne, for people that don't know. I'm sure most people listening probably know where Garrett is. But anyone outside of Indiana, when I say Garrett, they're like, "Oh, Gary," or I just say Fort Wayne, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a small town. I came from a very poor family. So a single mother working part-time, had mental health issues. So I received a lot of support, not only from the community, but from all along my life, from scholarships and from schools and from different organizations. So I've always felt it important to kind of give back and pay it forward for all the kind of help that I received growing up.
Yeah. Do you have, we'll get back to SCORE in a minute. Do you have any clue as to what your next adventure might be professionally? Because I don't know, you seem like you're always looking for something else to add to the plate.
Yeah. Well, yeah, technically, I guess you can see me, but yeah, I'm relatively young. I look younger than what I am, but
well, you're a lot younger than I am. I'll tell you that.
But you are correct. I mean, I have, if you consider, I could live to 80 plus, then I've really only been alive for half my life, and if you look at kind of what I've done, then it really is limitless as far as like what I could do going forward. But I considered, maybe starting another business, maybe, last year I ran for office. So, maybe going into politics, just kind of all over the place. Typical entrepreneur just can't kind of, you're kind of have the ADD syndrome, or you're kind of always looking for new opportunities or interests and pursuing them.
Yeah. So I got that right.
Yeah.
Okay. So your specialty, which you mentioned was your specialty in working with SCORE, was the hurdles that come from, helping people get over the hurdles when it comes to starting a business. But SCORE also works in other areas, right? It works in expanding a business, exiting a business. But you tend to focus on starting a business, right? I mean, is that your wheelhouse?
I mean, yes and no. I'm more than willing and able to help entrepreneurs at kind of any stage that they're at, whether they're looking to exit, because obviously I've exited, so I've kind of been through the process. But just SCORE in general tends to attract, or the majority of our clients are kind of the early stage entrepreneurs, where they're just either in contemplation phase of starting the business, or they just started and they're kind of learning or wanting to find out how to grow or expand. So by default, the majority of not just my clients, but probably the clients across the board are your more early stage startups.
And what are some of the hurdles that either you've witnessed through SCORE or witnessed personally when you've started a business? What are some of the chief challenges that people face?
There are obviously many. For me personally, and with a lot of clients that I work with, you don't know what you don't know, and unless you went to college and were a business major or had a family member who was a business owner, there's not like a clear blueprint for a lot of people of how do I even start a business, or where do I start? And even though you may be doing everything right, you have nobody really, unless you contact SCORE, you have no one really telling you like, am I doing everything correctly, or am I doing everything that I should be doing? So yeah, like I said, I've been in school probably more than half my life, and during all the time in school, I didn't have like a single business class or course. So which is sad, because a lot of doctors who go into private practice, they are essentially business owners. So not providing that background or knowledge is kind of a shame. But some of the big problems kind of across the board when I talk to clients is, it obviously takes money to make money, and usually a lot of people don't have a pile of cash that they're sitting on. So funding becomes a major issue as far as where they're going to get the money to start their idea, start their business. And then kind of, like I said, navigating all the regulatory hurdles as far as registering your LLC and EIN and getting all the right insurances and whatnot. They just don't know what they need or how to go about it.
And what else is involved in it?
Really, I mean, it sounds and it seems complex, but really at the end of the day, starting the business, once you know how to do it, is fairly simple. I mean, really, you don't even need to legally form an LLC. You could just be a sole proprietor and just hang a shingle and declare yourself a business.
But I would imagine one of the things in starting a business, because I've heard this, I'm not an entrepreneur. I am risk averse, and that's just not something that I think I could do it. Don't want to. But it would seem to me that one of the things that's really important in starting a business is there a market? I'm going to guess that may come up a lot, where somebody may have some really good idea, and after further discussion and research, hopefully, they discover that the market's not that great.
Yes, you are absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. They even have a term for it. It's like inventor's bias or owner's bias. But yeah, everybody comes to me with like they think they have like the next Uber or whatnot, and without really evaluating whether the product or service that they have is going to fulfill a need or is wanted. And if you don't have any clients or customers, you're not going to be in business.
Yeah.
So that is probably step one, is figuring out, are they solving the problem?
And, I'm sure starting a business is trying and difficult and challenging in any kind of environment, but we're now in this really interesting business environment, economic environment, where so many parts of our economy are uncertain, like really uncertain. As well as, I could throw a lot of things into this basket, as well as I think there's a question as to whether data that we're going to start receiving from the economy, whether it's at the federal level or it's a state level, I think is potentially going to be questionable, right? Is it going to be true fact-based, based data, or is it going to have some partisanship to it? And data becomes important, right, in a business, because we use data and figures, right, to determine, strategy, right, for all kinds of things. Is it still rewarding? Could it still be rewarding for someone in the present environment to start a business, or is it just too darn dangerous?
So yeah, you unpacked a lot there. You are correct.
I did. I'm sorry.
We are in a very uncertain time. I hate to use the word unprecedented, but yeah. Going along with the data, obviously we're in a government shutdown right now. So a lot of the agencies like the Bureau of Labor Statistics aren't able to collect the data on, unemployment or stuff like that. But that being said, obviously the shutdown's eventually going to end and we'll start collecting data. But we have kind of gotten into this more, like you mentioned, partisanship divide, where at the whim of kind of different administrations, you can kind of put in the people that are going to do and say what you want them to. And so it's always going to make, skew numbers. I've even seen this in healthcare, where it's supposed to be, nonpartisan, and I'm not even going to get into RFK Jr. and kind of some of the decisions or kind of what the current administration.
No, that'd be fascinating if you did, but it's okay if you don't get into that. No, but I guess my point is that I view information, being a former journalist, as I want it to be as close to the facts, so that I can make informed decisions just about my personal life, right? Mm-hmm. And I just get this feeling that we're starting to move away from, just facts.
Yes.
So getting back to my question, we've kind of taken a detour here. Is this like a good time to be thinking about starting a business with so much uncertainty? Yeah,
and like you mentioned earlier, to be an entrepreneur, you have to be somewhat of a risk taker. It's risky to put a lot of time, effort, and often usually money into a venture that very well could fail. And I've heard from someone that the majority of successful companies that we know today were formed during times of uncertainty or recession.
Well, actually, some did quite well. I mean, they could capitalize on times of uncertainty.
Yes. Like Microsoft, Airbnb, some of the big household names. So you're probably never going to find the exact right time to start a business where all the conditions favor you, and there's no better time than today to start one. I always say, when there's a will, there's a way. So don't let all the uncertainty and politics and all that kind of get in the way of what you want to do and your goals, because other people are able to navigate it. So there's no reason you can't either, especially with the help of someone
like you.
Yeah, at SCORE.
Yeah, or SCORE.
Yeah.
From a purely character standpoint, what kind of intrinsic qualities should a person have to be a successful entrepreneur?
Yeah, so that kind of goes to the age-old question of, can entrepreneurship be taught, or are you born an entrepreneur? And I feel it's a little bit of both. So we already touched on one important quality of a successful entrepreneur. You have to be willing to take risks. Right. If you aren't, you aren't going to be successful. You probably won't even get started if you aren't willing to take risks. But other very important qualities are, one, you have to be very resilient. Entrepreneurship is no easy ride. There's lots of ups and downs, and when the downs, many times you're going to feel like you can't do it or you want to give up. But that's just a normal part of being a business owner. So if you aren't resilient, you, again, aren't going to be, a successful entrepreneur, but probably just not in business in general. And then you also have to be very adaptable. As a business owner, you're going to face many different obstacles, challenges. You're going to probably have to pivot multiple times. But if you're very rigid in your thinking, then that doesn't lean too well to being at least a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah. And so some entrepreneurs, or some people who look at entrepreneurship, they are dreamers. So how do you encourage somebody to get past the dreamer stage, which doesn't always bring fruits, right? Mm-hmm. Am I right about that? Right. Somebody has this dream, but they haven't really thought it out.
Mm-hmm. You are completely correct. I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who are the dreamer or the visionary, which is somewhat of an important quality. I mean, you have to have somewhat of a vision to start and grow a business, but you also need to have a doer or someone that can get stuff done.
Someone who's a little pragmatic, right?
Exactly.
More than you are, yeah.
Yeah. So the best entrepreneurs are ones that kind of have both qualities. They're a dreamer and a doer. They are good at kind of nuts and bolts and getting in the weeds instead of being looking at everything from a 30,000-foot view. And unfortunately, a lot of my time spent mentoring clients is often reeling them in or trying, maybe even dissuading them from going into business based on what they're telling me, which I find just as valuable as helping someone get into business and not making a huge mistake.
Yeah. What do you personally get out of being a mentor? And I guess as the chair, being somewhat of an administrator, I guess, of sorts at SCORE, how is this feeding your wandering soul?
Yeah. So, when I guess you could say retired and was looking to fill my time and purpose.
Oh, you're too young. Stop. You're too young to retire.
Yeah. I hate using that word. I usually say semi-retired, or I work full time. I just don't get paid for it. Yeah. But Of all the different, of which there are many different, volunteer opportunities, organizations, which are great. I have found SCORE to be one of the, if not the most kind of fulfilling opportunity. It's great if you can volunteer at a soup kitchen and go there an hour a month or a week and whatnot, but it's more kind of passive. Really, as a mentor for SCORE, I get to use all my knowledge that I've gained through experience, and it kind of scratches all the different itches as far as interacting with people. And you really feel like you're making a difference or helping them, as opposed to some of the other opportunities or organizations that I am or could take a part of. So I'd say. Obviously I have a passion for entrepreneurship and business, so that helps. But it really is much more fulfilling than many of the other different opportunities available.
Yeah, but and yet, as you said, you had a business that helped with addiction recovery, which is sort of a different sort of way of helping out. That's not so much business. That's more about getting somebody on the straight and narrow. And they're not in the same bucket.
They aren't. Yeah. So SCORE is not the only organization I'm involved with. I'm involved with the Rotary Club, which is a very philanthropic organization. I tend to join all these different clubs where the majority of the other members skew a little bit older. I'm like the youngest one at all these different places, but and Matthew 25, which
so Matthew 25 is not in the same bucket either as the other, where you're really helping people in need.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I like to help people in many different aspects of life, not just their starting the business, but in healthcare at Matthew 25, and Rotary Club does a whole bunch of different philanthropic kind of outreach and activities.
Many moons ago, I belonged to Rotary. No, it was many moons ago. Yeah. So you have talked about one. So the SCORE volunteers. I had always been under the impression that most of the SCORE volunteers were retired. Yet I did take a look at some of the SCORE volunteers you have now, and some don't appear to be retired or entirely retired. So is it a mix between those who are retired and those who still may have occupations?
Yeah. So back in the day, SCORE used to mean Service Corps of Retired Executives, hence why the majority of the members...
Oh, thank you. You gave me the acronym, right? Yeah. Service Corps of Retired Executives.
They don't let us use that acronym anymore just because they are trying to be more inclusive and attract mentors or volunteers that are still working either part-time or full-time. And I'd say maybe a quarter of our current members are still working in some capacity. But still the majority are, like I said, skew a little bit older, and they are technically retired. Just because that's kind of, people obviously who are retired have more time and energy to volunteer in organizations.
But a person who still is in business or still working in an organization still might be a SCORE volunteer. Is that correct?
Oh, completely. And we actually encourage people that are still working because once you get out of it for a couple of years, you kind of forget, not so much forget, but it becomes a little bit more distant, the struggles and just keeping up with different laws and different aspects of business.
I'm going to get in trouble for this, but that's like the college professor that's been out of the industry for 25 years and has no concept of what's going on now. It's kind of like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's why they wanted to expand the membership and why we're trying to possibly even get
right,
more.
And that's why I was leading up to, is that you are trying to expand the number of mentors that you have, right?
Completely, yeah. Not just at our chapter, but nationwide. Obviously, with an organization, any nonprofit or volunteer organization, you're going to have natural attrition and people leaving, quitting, dying, unfortunately. So we're always going to need new members to kind of fill those spots.
And for a person that might be considering this, might actually listen to this podcast, what's going to be the big thrill for them to become a SCORE mentor?
So in addition to
other than what you've mentioned
Yes.
about you personally.
Yes. So being a SCORE mentor not only is a great way to get back to the community and grow the business entrepreneurial community that you live in, but also it's very rewarding for you as a mentor. It's not just mentoring, but we are a cohesive group that meets regularly. We have monthly meetings where we'll bring in a speaker to talk about a different aspect of business, about law, HR, whatever that our clients may be facing. So not only are you still able to constantly learn, but then you're surrounded by all these other much more brilliant than I am entrepreneurs who have done amazing things in their life. And it's kind of almost like a informal CEO roundtable that you're a part of. So there's that social aspect or camaraderie that you have, which again adds to kind of the fulfillment of it.
So speaking of that, about the fulfillment of it, we don't have time for a lot of success stories, but do you have a success story that you could share that would give an example of, maybe you don't have to name the person or the business, but that somebody or some entity that you mentored that wound up being a success, which I assume that if you mentor somebody and they're successful, that kind of makes you feel good.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
There's some fulfillment, right?
Yeah. Anytime you have a successful client, even though obviously they did the majority of the work, you feel like maybe you had a small part in it. But SCORE, I'll give one example of one of my clients, but SCORE, some of the more well-known clients that we've had is Vera Bradley back in the day was a former SCORE client, Cookie Cottage, Windows, Doors, and Moores. These are kind of the more local, familiar names.
Interesting. I wasn't even aware of that.
Oh, yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. But I can't claim it. I obviously was not a part of SCORE during those instances. But even in my own clients, I had... For example, I meet with this one individual probably monthly. I have for about a year, and he came to me with a very successful business, but he was looking to kind of take it to the next level and expand or grow. But he kind of was stuck because he was, like most entrepreneurs, kind of doing all the work himself and couldn't look past that. So I kind of helped him look into hiring a sales team or a sales individual to start, so that he could expand his business beyond what he could do himself. Because otherwise, if he was already maxed out with what he was doing, so there was no way. He was kind of a plateau, a ceiling that he was never going to break unless he looked outside the box and kind of looked to rely on people to do the work, some of the work that he was doing for him. But there are many examples of similar stories where I've helped navigate some of these struggles or problems to get them to kind of the other side.
Yeah. Why don't you tell our audience how people can get in touch with SCORE? What's the easiest way to do that?
So there are many ways to get in contact. The easiest, most common way is like with most things, you go to our website. So that's score.org. There you can either click on become a mentor or become a mentee. That's also where you can go to find all our workshops and webinars, which are all recorded. So even if you don't attend them live, you can always watch them at a future date. You can also call our office, which is, you can Google our local office, or email me or the office directly.
And one thing I just wanted to clear up. So the Small Business Administration has been kind of screwy here lately on what it's funding and what it's not funding. Where are you at with funding in the future of SCORE?
That is still to be determined. We just found out that we were going to get our funding for fiscal year 25, which was already appropriated, and we were supposed to get, obviously last year. But as far as fiscal year 26, which per the government, started October 1. There is no funding in place for SCORE among a number of other entrepreneurial organizations in the current budget, although that is still in negotiations. So we may get some funding, we may even get level funding, but it's to be determined. And we are, as an organization, are no longer relying on government support. We are looking, like I said, starting to charge for some of our services to become more self-sufficient.
Okay. But there still may be some free services.
But like I said, at our core of mentoring, one-on-one, free, confidential mentoring will, from what I understand, will always remain available.
Cool. Well, listen, Andrew, it's been great having you here, and good luck on this journey that you've been on. This is fascinating. I'm going to be curious to find out what your next adventure is.
I am too. So thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a wrap on today's episode of the Midwest Flourish podcast. Want to dig deeper or get involved? Head to marketingthemidwest.com to explore how we can work together to empower your community to flourish. Let's keep the Midwest momentum going and shape the future of our region together.